In a sport where speed is the supreme goal, one man from the Isle of Man has proven he has no equals at the Tour de France.
Cavendish goes, the rocket has been launched, and no one can match Mark Cavendish.
Mark Cavendish of America's Team Columbia won his second consecutive stage Friday and fourth in 13 races. Even when he appeared boxed in during the final sprint, he emerged, attacked, and conquered, evoking memories of the rider that finished just behind him.
Mark Cavendish being challenged by Robbie McEwen, but this is the new Robbie McEwen.
Can the peloton suppress his speed, or can the world's fastest rider prove it for a fifth time? In stage 14, we head east to Digne-les-Bains, next on Versus. One of the best-known novels in history, Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, begins in Digne-les-Bains, and today for our peloton, it will represent both the end of a long day and the beginning of the rider's quest into the Alps. Hello, everybody. Along with Bob Roll, I'm Craig Hummer, and we welcome you to our Saab pre-race show. And certainly, Bob, Mark Cavendish is the story of this year's Tour de France. Whether he makes it to Paris or not, it doesn't matter. He won yesterday his fourth out of 13 stages.
Mark Cavendish absolutely on fire. He's burning down the house of the sprinters in the Tour de France this year. Yesterday, no exception on the road to Nîmes. And clean wheels to all the fast men. Didn't have that great of a lead out, was boxed in, and still found a way to win. Unbelievable riding.
Let's take you to the start of yesterday's stage. As we've seen time and time again in this year's Tour, the breakaways started early.
Here's Berard going away. On his wheel, Nicky Terpstra, just after they dropped the flag. So these riders would have a long, hot day in the sun and a big breakaway. They never got a whole lot of time, so there was not much question that they would eventually be caught.
Driven by teams like Columbia, Française des Jeux, and Milram, finally the catch would take place. But what a crash we saw on the road.
This is Svein Kraus, and when you see his bike go up in the air like that, all you can think of is somebody is seriously injured. But the way he jumped up right off there just shows you the resiliency of these bike racers.
The bike would be smashed into pieces, actually broken in half, Bob. Talk about force.
And they're going to have to do some road construction to fix the sign there. Just exiting that roundabout, very dangerous.
Our Saab Turbo Sprint once again from the Isle of Man, Mark Cavendish.
Cavendish, this is the acceleration to the line, and he has 3 or 4 bike lengths there. It's a race for second place.
You mentioned it already, but it looked as though he'd made a mistake, and he was boxed in.
You can see here, this is the sprint starting to unfold. There's Mark Renshaw at the very top of your screen. Little Robbie McEwen, number 4, but Cavendish there, number 1, starts to sprint towards the left. McEwen has the jump on him. And this is only about 100 meters from the line. And McEwen made the perfect launch for his sprint. And this should have been a victory for McEwen. McEwen there up against the fence. Oscar Freire can't go either way to come around him. But Cavendish, with that late burst of speed, and look at this acceleration to the line. He just keeps extending his advantage over McEwen. About this point, McEwen knows he's not going to win the stage, and Mark Cavendish does.
Everyone left shaking their heads, especially Robbie McEwen. He thought for a moment he could best the best, but it wouldn't happen. Meanwhile, Cadel Evans stays in yellow.
A very reasonable day for the yellow jersey. Lotto not having to do a lot of work, so they conserve their energies very well on this stage. A great ride by Cadel Evans to stay in yellow.
Our Michelob Ultra GC standings, Evans, as you saw, still number 1. Frank Schleck, still very close.
And Christian Vande Velde there in 3rd, hanging tough. Bernard Cole, Denny Menchov, no change to our top 5.
Carlos Sastre still in 6th. Kim Kierken manages 7th yet again. The top 10 rounded out by Efimkin, Astroloza, and Nibali.
These are the others. Valverde, 12th. 441 down. That's a big disadvantage for him going into the Alps. Cunego, but George Hincapie, Danny Pate, and Will Frischkorn still hanging tough in the Tour.
Strategically, it was Johan Brunel and Lance Armstrong, Bob, who perfected how to approach the Tour. How would you rate Evans's control so far?
Well, he's been a great ride so far in the Tour. His team maybe has left him isolated at the end of the stages just a little bit, but they did improve tremendously on yesterday's stage, so they're starting to get the gist of it, I think.
Well, speaking of Johan Brunel, we want to remind you that starting tomorrow, the Master joins us on set. Bob, he can do it all. He's won races.
Now, this is a great example of a pro that was solid in his career and then went on to do even more greater things with this man, Lance Armstrong. Johan Bruyneel, a real star of the sport. It's going to be great to have him with us.
The mastermind behind not only Lance, but also Alberto Contador. Johan Bruyneel joins us on Versus throughout the remainder of the tour. The thermal spas of this area have provided relief for hundreds over the years. Relief awaits our riders a few hours from now. And when we come back, Phil and Paul and predictions.
The 2008 Tour de France pre-race on Versus is presented by Saab and the legendary 9.3 Turbo. Saab, born from jets.
This is what the fashionistas in France are wearing at the moment. Yellow for Cadel Evans, Oscar Freire in green, and Nibali wears white, and Sebastian Lang stays in polka dots. Welcoming in Phil and Paul yet again. And guys, I'm a little surprised to see you here this morning. We were up late, Paul, with that dinner last night.
Yes, rather an interesting dinner. In fact, it was about as long as the Tour de France. It started off with the sprinters, moved into the flat stages, then the individual time trial, and after that, the pièce de résistance down at the end, which I thought looked a little bit like an African hut.
Yes, it did, actually. We couldn't quite work out whether to go and put it on our bedside or eat it.
And that's what we have at the Tour de France, a lot of free time, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 12:45 getting into bed, that was a lot of fun.
It did make a change from the freeway sandwich and the bottle of Badois.
It was a nice change,
Yeah.
the haute cuisine of France. Well, Phil, you have been a member of British cycling in the community for a number of years. How long has it been, though, since we've seen the excitement that Mark Cavendish is generating?
Well, he's such an exciting rider. I mean, he's won 4 stages. He takes it almost in his stride. He's come here to do his job. He does his job, you know. I don't know how long he'll stay in the race, but he'll decide to go home before Paris. I'm sure of that. He'll cook bigger eggs, bigger fish to fry when he gets up to Beijing, I think. But he's a fabulous sprinter. He's clearly the fastest man around because he's up against the likes of Robbie McEwen, Thor Hushovd, Oscar Freire, and he didn't just beat him by a centimetre. He beat him by 3 to 4 lengths and coming from the back as well.
That is one of the reasons why he is the talk of the town. But Paul, again, today supposedly a sprinter's stage. There is some elevation. How does the race look?
Well, I'm not sure it's really going to be a sprinter's day because it really is quite a lumpy stage today. We move away from the Mediterranean and we head down really towards what here is the foothills of the Alps. And that's what's going to make it, I think, a little bit difficult. The kind of day when finally we could see the breakaway succeed. The riders move away from Nîmes and they start to climb up throughout most of the day. It's a long drag uphill to Digne-les-Bains, which, by the way, is reputedly the sunniest town in France. And if you look at that profile, that's an indication it's going to be a heavy day in the saddle for everybody.
Yes, it shouldn't be a sprint finish. 121 miles on a very, very hot day here as we come to Digne-les-Bains. It's the difference between Sarasota in Florida and Naples. That's 117 miles. 12th time we've been here. Last finish in 2005. David Moncoutier. And you know, Moncoutier could win today. He either sits at the back of the field or he crosses the line in first place. He never bothers with the in-between.
There's a Cat 4 at the end of the day, Bob. What's the percentage that we're going to see someone use that as a chance to attack?
Well, hopefully the percentage is 100%, and we don't see another bunch gallop. But I do believe that the peloton is fed up with Mark Cavendish dominating all of the stages, and everybody is going to attack.
Yeah, we're not.
You're all jealous.
You're not.
Funny, gentlemen, that you should bring up domination. It's that time of the show again. Saab performance predictions time. But I got to give credit to my man Paul Sherwin. A huge win yesterday, Paul.
Huge.
Massive win, leaping up the overall classification, but still quite a long way behind Mr. Craig Hummer.
That's all right. I like that lead at the moment, but as you have said time and time again, it's not over until the Champs-Élysées, and with wins like yesterday, nipping at my heels. Now,
keep this lead. It could be over by Alpe
on
d'Huez.
the opposite side of the coin, which we'll get to in a moment, because we do have to present the jersey one more time. Not hopefully for the last time, but there we go. Yellow again today. Here. Sorry. No. All right.
Don't
Well,
touch what you
as
can't
I
have.
started to say, the flip side of the coin is our esteemed colleague, Mr. Liggett, who has first pick today.
First
and
pick.
It's once, twice, 3 times lucky, I think, for you.
Absolutely right. Yes, I think that the key to winning this competition is consistent, rather. And I've been consistently bad with 1 point. But now I'm also saying consistent with the same rider, Oscar Freire, for the 3rd day running. The last 2 days, this man has been 5th He must be fed up of finishing 5th. He must want to win, for goodness sake. Oscar's heading up the pole in the green jersey, and I hope he heads up my classification chart and gets me 5 points total by the end of the day.
Any chance, if he finishes 5th today, any chance we can give Phil a bonus point?
I will agree to that.
One
bonus
so I'll have
point.
2 points.
Yeah, brilliant.
Well, that's double what you have now. Why are you complaining?
That's a good point.
Yes, yeah, good point. You know.
Okay.
I'm looking after your interests.
Thank you very much. Well, you guessed the 11th for me last
Bob
time.
Roll, an interesting dilemma with you today. Now, is this calculation, or are you throwing caution to the wind?
No, I think it's a little bit more calculated. I think that the peloton really is fed up with Cavendish's winning streak. They're going to really attack hard, and I'm going with one of the toughest Frenchmen in the bike race, Pierre Fedrigo. They have had a very little to crow about throughout the Tour de France all year, so I think he's going to go out there in the breaks and get me some more points. He's a really strong rider, and I think he's been saving himself till when I picked him for the stage win. And if he doesn't get me some points, I'm going to have to admonish him afterwards.
Good for you.
I went with a little bit of the idea that you both are using. The peloton's fed up. You need someone that's tough. So I went with the German, Eric Zabel. I think he's realized he is not faster than Cavendish, which is obvious. So he's going to try a different way to win. He's going to try to get up with the leaders as soon as he can and use that last climb to vault himself to the victory.
Could be a good choice, that, Paul, couldn't it?
Excellent choice. A brilliant choice, I'd have to say. But today I had a very hard time coming up with my pick because I wanted Oscar Freire. I wanted Eric Zabel.
Yes.
I didn't want Pierre Fedrigo at all.
Nobody
actually.
would.
He was never anywhere near my list. So I've decided today I'm going to go for David Moncoutier, Robbie Hunter, and Pipo Pozzato.
Oh, well, lucky you.
Not allowed.
Well, I thought it was a try. I was trying it, but the producer wouldn't allow me to go through. So I'm going to go for Pipo Pozzato because he's the kind of guy who, on a stage like today, he can win from the breakaway, he can win from the main field when they get over the last climb, because Bob's right. That last little climb at the end is where Pipo Pozzato is going to jump away, catch Pierre Fedrigo, and beat him on the line.
It may seem like an obvious question, especially since we've talked about this being a sprinting stage, but I'll throw it to you, Phil, since you are learned and full of wisdom.
Oh.
Why didn't any of us pick Cavendish?
I don't think he's going to get over those last few climbs. He is getting tired, and I'm convinced that either today or tomorrow he'll probably go home. He wants now to concentrate on the Olympic Games. He's won 4 stages. He mustn't be greedy.
No.
Although he's second in the green jersey competition, it's not been his target.
Mind you, Craig Hummer's been a little bit greedy in our competition.
Oh,
No, he's been very
come
greedy.
now. That's not
Very,
the right
very
way to look
greedy.
at it. How about successful? How about
Lucky.
Exactly. Good. I'll take luck any day of the week. Well, Cavendish has been anything but
Well, I'll tell
lucky.
you what,
He has earned.
If he comes to finish with Fedrigo and Moncoutier, Cavendish will win.
Solid bet. Solid bet. Are we going to give you a point for that,
I
too?
hope so.
Well, who knows the way it will all turn out at the end of the day. That is why they ride the stage. This area has been a commercial stop since the Roman era. It's the primary center of lavender trade, and someone will smell of success at the end of the day.
The 2008 Tour de France pre-race on Versus is presented by Saab and the legendary 9.3 Turbo. Saab, born from jets.
Yesterday, stage 13 saw yet another contentious sprint finish. But more importantly, an unprecedented 4th stage win for Team Columbia's newest superstar, Mark Cavendish. Once again, he displayed his unparalleled explosion of speed. He's rightly earned the title of fastest man in the peloton. Today, the roads begin to rise once more. And although it's branded as a flat stage, the 2 Category 4 climbs may prove challenging for some of the sprinters. The opportunists will be looking for their chance at hitting the line victorious. But with the Alps looming, the overall leaders had better be preparing for the rigid roads ahead, as the punishing fight for yellow will certainly take off tomorrow. Join us now for stage 14 as the 2008 Tour de France heads back towards the hills. It's all up next on Versus. weeks since the Tour de France started in Brest, and the hills today will gradually become big mountains tomorrow. But today, the sprinters may have a say, you never know. It's a long way beneath a hot sun. 121 miles it is, on the way the race comes from Nîmes down to where we're sat right now in Digne-les-Bains. I have to tell you, this is a most beautiful place. Welcome back to our live coverage on Versus Stage 14 of the Tour de France today. Phil Liggett with Paul Sherwin. We've been here before and we've seen some great victories here, and we've very rarely, if ever, seen a bunch sprint.
Very rarely. It's a real tough way to get here, any which way you want to. Any combination of roads to get to Digne-les-Bains means it's a kind of route, really, Phil, that does provoke a breakaway.
Well, one man who rides this race always sits at the back unless he's out to win, Paul. Take us through this.
Well, it was the 14th of July and a certain man from France wanted to get himself a victory, and it was David Moncoutier. This year in the Tour de France, he wears number 188. But on this occasion, with 36 kilometres to go to the finish, he took off away from a breakaway group, as we just said, and he got himself the victory.
Well, on the podium, though, today, as it has been for the last few days, Cadel Evans, he pulled on this leader's jersey at Haut-de-Cam. He's gone through what we're calling the transitional stages, but Paul, now, he may try and rest today because tomorrow he fights.
I think he needs to rest today, Phil, because tomorrow there will be a challenge to his overall supremacy. Maybe from Frank Schleck, who's only 1 second behind. Possibly from Christian van der Velde in third at 38 seconds. But maybe the dark horse, the dangerous man, the quiet man from Russia in fifth, Denny Menchov. And of course, if Carlos Sastre, Phil, wants to try and win this race or even get to the podium, he has to make a move.
Well, we may not see too many of those names in the action today. This is the rollout this morning. There's Cadel Evans with that 1 second lead. Oscar Freire in the green jersey. As we head out now, heading towards Digne-les-Bains. And by the time we got to the first sprint at Saint-Marie, 21 riders were clear. And in the sprint, there, as you can see, Will Fishcorn of Garmin-Chipotle going across in second place. Stein de Volder was the first man, and Bernard Eisel was the third man. But that breakaway of 21 got snapped up, but 4 of them decided to keep on going, and they are still in the lead. And there's the names for you.
Well, you've got in that breakaway Jose Van Gutierrez, William Bonnet, Bram Tankink and Sandy Cassar in the white jersey. He's the Frenchman who last year, Phil, was a winner of a stage of the Tour de France. Well, today is a very hot day indeed. 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius, sunny and with a slight wind, a slight breeze, I would have to say, yes. Really, west-southwesterly at around about 5 miles an hour.
It's a beautiful, beautiful day, except if you've got to put the pressure on in the Tour de France. And you can see by the length of this line that they are taking that 4-man breakaway quite seriously here. There's a lot of riders that want to do something. Look at this, only 49.8 miles left to go.
Well, Phil, in the first hour of racing, we covered 52.5 kilometres, 33 miles an hour. The second hour of racing, 45 kilometres an hour, for an average speed of, so far in the first 2 hours of racing, of almost 48 kilometres an hour. That's an average speed of roughly 30 miles an hour. In the main field now, all of a sudden they've got a little bit of anger starting to come in. Team Liquigas in the lime green jerseys for Filippo Pozzato have come to the front. They want to try and mix it up, but also the light blue jerseys of Milram. And a lot of people think that Eric Zabel could be the man looking for the win today.
Well, thanks to the extraordinary sprint finishing of Mark Cavendish this year with his 4-stage wins, there's a lot of teams in this race, Paul, have got very little to show for 2 weeks in the Tour de France.
Certainly, and for riders like Oscar Freire, Eric Zabel and men like that, they would like to see whether they can get themselves a stage victory. A lot of people will think they can get rid of Mark Cavendish, Phil, on the nasty little 4th category climb down towards the end. But again, the holiday makers have turned out to see the Tour de France once again. It really is amazing every night when we move forward how many camping cars there are out on the route driving from place to place.
Well, there's only a couple of small climbs. We're approaching the Côte de Man, which is still a few kilometres away, about, let me just say, about 13 kilometres still to go to the top of the Côte de Man, and then we go downhill to a sprint in Oraison. And then we'll head up to the climb, the Col de l'Orme, which is a col, but it's only 4th category, and that's where they might manage to crack up and break for the finish. Now, as we came onto today, sad news reaching us that Barlow World, they've only been in the sport a couple of years. They came in as a wildcard team last year, have taken the decision today to pull out of the sport because of Moises Duenas, the guy who tested positive after the time trial, and that is really extremely sad. This was an excellent team. It would be a huge blow to South African cycling, as well as to riders like Robbie Hunter and new pro there, John Lee Augustin.
Yeah, very sad news for the cyclists, Phil, but it goes against company policy, and they felt that they had to make that decision vis-a-vis all of their employees and, of course, vis-a-vis a lot of their suppliers and people that they work with. So, tough decision to make, but when it's a corporate policy, there's not very much you can do.
No, so I happen to know the CEO of that company, Chris Fisher. He was a great supporter of this sport, and he often had to fight boardroom discussions not to sponsor cycling. He wouldn't have much of a leg to stand on after what has happened during this Tour de France. So that's a big team leaving the sport. But for the riders here, they're enjoying a sunny ride today, and they're under pressure. Two teams at the front there, they want those 4 riders back. Have a feeling this is going to be a tough day on the eve of entry into the Alps, and Paris is on the other side of the Alps. See you in a moment.
The 2008 Tour de France on Versus is brought to you by Michelob Ultra. Live life to the ultra.
Welcome back to Tour de France. We need blue skies again today, and it's going very nipply to say the least. They're averaging just on 30 miles an hour inside the last 80 kilometers now as we head towards the Haute-Provence department of France. A very beautiful area. Just look at that peloton today, Paul.
These are very tough racing roads, actually, and although they look pretty flat, they're climbing up most of the time throughout the day to around about 700 meters in altitude, and that's where Digne-les-Bains is situated. And of course the road surface here has its word to play as well in a day like this, because the road surface in this part of the world is actually not very smooth at all. It might look so here, but it's actually a very gravelly surface, which actually reduces the rolling resistance on the road. So a lot of the time the riders on a day like this, Phil, feel as if they've got glue stuck to the outside of their tyres.
I can understand how they might feel. That's Luis Leon Sanchez there, who won the stage into Aurillac. Well, at the start this morning, one sprinter not managing yet to get the best of Mark Cavendish is Robbie McEwen. Here he is talking now with Robbie Ventura.
Robbie, we both got treated. I think all the fans got treated to a special sprint between you and Cavendish, something we've been waiting for. The first week of the tour has been a little bit of a struggle. What was different yesterday? Where did you summon that energy, and why the second place yesterday?
Well, yesterday I've been frustrated from the day before, and I got boxed in and didn't even get to sprint at all. And yesterday I absolutely wanted to just get everything out, and I actually was too far back, and I came from a long way. We were still about 350 out, and I thought I've just got to go now, or I'm not going to get a run at all. So, you know, I started sprinting at just over 300 metres to go, and the thing was, by the time I got to the front, then Cav started his sprint and went back past me, and I just had nothing left in the last 100. But it was better than not being able to do any sprint at all.
If it does come down to a field sprint again today, with the speed and the power of that Columbia train, how are you going to get yourself in position to be on even ground with Cavendish when you guys start the sprint?
Well, that's the very difficult thing when you haven't got a team working for you in the sprint, and you haven't got a specific helper in the sprint. You do have to try and position yourself, and it's a case of using more energy and not having as much left to sprint with, or getting lucky that you can get that position and hold it without too much of a fight. But expecting that to happen in the tour is like expecting it to snow today.
Well, thank you very much. Let's see if Robbie can get it right this time. First of all, there is a slight problem, Robbie. There's 4 riders in the lead. I think the teams will chase, because Sandy Cassar in this breakaway for Française de Jeu is only 13 minutes off the race lead, and he's got just over 3 at the moment.
Yeah, but I don't think he has to worry too much about it snowing this afternoon, Phil. He'd have to go quite high in the mountains to see snow, especially when we're looking at temperatures soaring up the thermometer this afternoon, 32 degrees Celsius at the moment. The workload of the leaders is pretty even as far as I can see. Ivan Gutierrez is doing a little bit more than anybody else, but William Bonnet, Bram Tankink and Sandy Cassar sharing it out quite evenly.
The 4 guys then looking quite good just for now. Well, as they approach now the 4th category climb of the day, the Col de Man, or the Côte de Man rather, as we go on. So one little col that will come before the end. That could be a springboard. There's our upside down man from Switzerland, the world champion. Fabian Cancellara. One cancels out the other, I guess, if you're superstitious. Did a lot of work on Autocam for his team there.
Well, you can see 3 riders there from Team CSC sitting at the back end of the main field on a day like this, Phil. I just believe they're nurturing some hopes of an attack.
Rabobank also were in the early move today as well. They've got a man up there at the moment, Bram Tankink, as they continue up there. And Fabian Weckman in the white strip there. He's already crashed today, but he's up and riding again. Let's remind you then to come and play our Saab Watch and Win sweepstakes. Don't forget, all you have to do is log on to versus.com/fly to the finish. The code word you'll need today is Cervelo, and you can win a Cervelo SLC SL bicycle or a Saab 9.3 Sport Combi. That's your code word today, Cervelo. The peloton are coursing through this beautiful area here of the lower hills of the Haute-Provence as we head to Digne-les-Bains. It's a glorious day on the Tour de France. We'll take a break. When we come back, that little group might be a bit closer to the peloton. Welcome back. There are some great days ahead now on the Tour de France here on Versus, and don't miss this one. Tomorrow morning, stage 15 will be live at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Big parties, I can sense it coming in California. We'll stay in Embrun. We'll start in Embrun and finish in Italy at Prato Novoso. So join us tomorrow. You won't want to miss it, but if you do miss it, don't forget you can catch everything in our enhanced primetime edition every night, including tonight at 8 Eastern. We go mountaineering tomorrow, and then we might get some idea as to who the final strongmen are for that last push up to Paris in the week of the Alps. It's going to be a super few days. All of the yellow numbers reflecting the sun today. This is Team CSC, Saxo Bank. They grabbed the team lead about 4 days ago. They're hanging on. Hanging on is not quite the right word. They've got a nice little lead in the team race just now after their wonderful escapade up Autocam. The predicted catch at 32 kilometres to go. Well, I have to remind you that yesterday the computer was completely out. That really doesn't work because it's impossible to judge the up and down of the speed of the peloton. But it's a nice little guide for somebody, I suppose. Yeah,
it's an excellent guide, a guide that we try to use. It just shows you basically, Phil, whether or not the race is moving forwards or backwards, the gap's getting smaller or larger. And generally, I tend to agree with the computer today that that breakaway is going to get caught.
Well, we'll see. This is the Prairie of Notre Dame as we race by these beautiful areas down in an area which still reflects Roman times here in France as we start to go into the mountains. A long drive for the television commentators tonight because we have 4 hours to drive on very small roads right up into the mountains to pick up the race tomorrow. Three minutes 5 seconds the gap, 67.2 kilometres to go. We're in Man, which means the first climb of the day is ahead. It's the 4th category Côte de Man. It has been a good day of racing. They have covered a lot of distance in a very short time today. 4 leaders, Hosan Ivan Gutierrez, William Bonnet, Bram Tankink, Sandy Kazar. Back in the main field is still Mark Cavendish. He's still in the race, and Paulie's looking for the 5th win, and it doesn't look as though that field is allowing these 4 riders their head.
On a day like today, I really expected the breakaway to succeed, especially when you bear in mind we're facing up to 3 very difficult mountain stages ahead with a rest day in the middle. And it looks as if now the main field, Phil, really have decided they want to try and come down into the town here of Digne-les-Bains as a solid group. And I would think one young man, that man from the Isle of Man, Mark Cavendish, is actually starting to lick his lips and thinking, maybe I can make it with number 5.
Well, who knows? He's moved up to 2nd place in the best, most consistent rider competition for that green jersey. I've got a feeling he won't be there to collect it in Paris, but he is in 2nd place at the moment. It is a glorious day here as we race towards the Haute-Provence and in the shadow of the Alps for a huge day tomorrow as we race up into Italy. But for today, Mark Cavendish and his team will want these riders back. The best placed rider is in the white there, Sandy Cassar. He's 13 minutes off Cadel Evans's yellow jersey, but although they've been out to 6 minutes, it's now back to 3.
Well, if you remember last year, Sandy Cassar tried very hard to get himself a stage victory. He was beaten to the line early on in the Tour by Cedric Vasseur. Then on stage 18, right down towards the end of the Tour de France, he was in an early breakaway like this, and a dog ran out into the race. He went straight over the top of the dog. The dog, I hasten to add, was fine.
I'm glad you did, because you were buried with emails as to how the dog was and not Sandy Cassar.
Sandy Cassar was pretty ripped up, but he still managed to stay in the breakaway group, and he got himself the victory down towards the end in front of a young man, a retiring man, I should say, by the name of Axel Merckx on that occasion. So he knows how to find a winning breakaway, and he's the only rider, I think, Phil, in this leading group of 4 who's actually won a stage so far in the Tour de France.
He is indeed. That was down in Angoulême last year. Yes, but between them, these guys have ridden 17 tours between these 4 riders. Gutierrez in the black, he's on his 5th tour. William Bonnet in the greens. It's Gutierrez who goes over the top. So the master of the tours goes over first, ahead of Tanking and Cassar. And the others have ridden, Cassar himself in white has ridden 7 tours.
Well, they will know all about the experience of the Tour on a day like this, because it is a roasting day in the southern part of France. The final of the transitional stages, really, from the Pyrenees across to the foothills of the Alps, and a different team now coming to the front to help set the pacemaking. I really am quite surprised here, Phil, but as you said, there's a lot of teams in the Tour de France so far have not had a chance to get themselves any individual glory, and that's because one man, Mark Cavendish from the Isle of Man, has been taking it all for himself.
Well, just looking at the excitement on the face of these youngsters here, but it just is a sad day for world cycling, because Barlow World, who are in the race, and they lost one of their riders to a positive dope check, Moses Duenas Navarro, and because of that, the company has announced they will stop sponsorship of the sport of cycling immediately the Tour de France ends. At least they've allowed the 4 survivors, John Lee Augustin, Gianpaolo Schuler, Chris Froome from Kenya, now racing on a British licence, and Robbie Hunter, the chance to finish in Paris. But they're out of the sport, and for South African cycling, that really is a huge blow.
It certainly is. We're just looking here at the Citadel of Maine, just at the top, perched on the top of this rock above the valley here, and that dates back to the 12th century. And a lot of it was basically made out of an ochre stone, which you can find in this part of the world.
Well, the race today starts steadily uphill all the way from Nîmes. It was very hot in Nîmes, but it's approaching in Fahrenheit now. We've just topped 90 degrees today, just over 32 degrees Celsius. So it's a good hot day for the riders, and the riders haven't worried about the sun. They really are going very quickly.
It's as if they're not even worried about what's coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow is a monster stage, I have to say. The climb that the riders will go over to take themselves into Italy is the Col dell'Angelo, which climbs up to 2,780 meters in altitude. That's going to be a beast of a climb. They climb up for around about 25 kilometers, and then to finish off the day, they've got a nasty mountaintop finish as well. Not quite as high as climbs like the Alpe d'Huez, but I think after the day they'll spend in the saddle, the summit of Prato Nervoso won't come too soon for a lot of guys.
Yes, I think they'll be welcoming their rest day, which is being spent in Italy on Monday before we race back into France on Tuesday. Wednesday, of course, we have terrific live coverage as we race all the way to the top of Alpe d'Huez. It's going to be a wonderful occasion and a very hard final week of the Tour de France. Cadel Evans knows he is going to be hit from every direction once these mountains start. His 1 second will not be worth a jot. He'll need a lot of time, I think. There's the bunch then as they go over the top of the Côte de Man. 66 kilometers once for the peloton this is now as they come over the top. The leaders are nearly 2 kilometers ahead of that. Inside 40 miles, these are the leaders. There's the man that hit a dog and had a spectacular crash right on our television cameras in the race last year on the road to Angoulême, another hot area of France as well. Well, the race goes on nonetheless, and the chase goes on as well. We'll see in a moment. Welcome back. We're popping into the car here of Team Columbia. Rolf Aldag on the left and Brian Holm, the driver, the management of the team. And coming back there, one of the team helpers, I can't quite see who it is. But they're talking Danish, I think. That might be the case with Brian Holm. But the idea here is to pass out the bottles, and then he has to carry them all the way back up to the car. I think it's possibly Thomas Lockfist who is taking the bottles there. Well, a lot of you want to know what exactly are domestiques and what's their part in the Tour de France. So we'll give you the answers now as we look at Edward Jones's Making Sense of the Tour.
Domestique's role is to make sure either your sprinter or your climber gets to his position.
The final lead out by Gert Stegmans now for Tom Bonen.
And I think it's always easier to ride harder for someone else than it is for yourself almost. I mean, it's just, you're really sacrificing, and it brings out something in you that, you know, maybe you couldn't normally do. I mean, if you've got someone like to win the race, you're going to give 110%.
The determination of Voigt's triumph on the day.
And so you don't really even think about your chances unless they say, hey, this is your day.
This has been a superb ride by McCartney.
You know, we go through these survival camps at the start of the year. It's pretty hardcore stuff, and you learn a lot about your teammates, you know, their weaknesses and strengths, and they learn a lot about your weaknesses and strengths. And, you know, when it comes to the crunch, you know, everyone's just ready to lay it all down for another rider.
If you have confidence in your team leader and you trust him, then you can ride way harder than you ever could for yourself. And you can get more bottles. You can keep him as comfortable as possible. I think that's what a domestique really is. I think it's trusting in your teammate and knowing that you can give absolutely everything for him so he can finish the race well.
Yes, without a great team, it's almost impossible to win a Tour de France. That Edward Jones is making sense of the Tour. And very often, many of these helpers get a great deal of satisfaction when their team leader comes home first because of their big effort they've made out on the course. There's the gap for you, 2:34, 37 miles to go. We're eating up the road today. And up at the back of the race here, this is Arnaud Coyot of Case Depend, teammate of Alejandro Valverde, who I think has lost his chance to win the Tour. We'll know when we get into the Alps, Paul, but I don't think he'll come back from that deficit on Hautecam.
No, I think he lost too much time and probably a little blow to his morale, because he came to the Tour Hill filled with a real thought that he could win the race this year. He's currently lying 12th place overall, 4:41 behind Cadel Evans. But you know, the time gaps we've got so far can completely and utterly change in the last week of this race. If you haven't looked after yourself in the first 14 days of racing, you'll find yourself paying a magnificent bill in the last week. And probably, I'd have to say, in the next 4 days, we've got that one rest day in between the Alpine stages. But the mountains of the Alps this year, to me, look absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, they are. And looking at the weather here in Digne-les-Bains today, I think we'll be taking this sun with us down the road and into the Alps. Could be a beautiful day. We know already there are thousands of spectators already in the Alps, in their campers, with their tents, with their bicycles. Cars are parked. They go shopping by bike and buy their bread at the local shop because they can't take the car. Somebody will steal the parking space. It is going to be a wonderful occasion, a big grand fete in the Alps this year for sure. And I know there's an awful lot of Australians pinning a lot of hope on Cadel Evans.
A lot of people pinning a lot of hope on the Alps, I think, as well, including Team CSC.
Looking at 2:28, 4 riders. They got away in a group of 21. As the group got caught, these 4 sprinted away and they got the gap. And so at 40 kilometres, there were just these 4 riders into the race, facing a breakaway of 142 if they're to stay away to the line today. And I've just got the feeling this bunch is not allowing them to run away as we thought it might happen. 195 there is Ryder Hagedal, the only Canadian in the race. He rides, of course, for Garmin Chipotle. Has had a wonderful Tour de France. In fact, both the American teams have. They couldn't have dreamt of a better debut into the Tour de France. There's a lot of teams haven't had success, and that's why they're racing hard today. Yes, the boys in light blue in their first Tour de France in those colours, riding high. They've had the lead in 3 of the 4 major competitions. And, of course, they've had all those stage wins with Mark Cavendish, who carries number 144. Ignore the time he's behind, doesn't matter. Kim Kirkin is the star here. He's had the yellow jersey for 4 days. He's now in 7th. Could come back, and I think will climb the classification. Good support, too, from Sutsuf and the other members of the team, not least Georgie Hincapie. And so their tour continues to be a story of success as we go back up to the leaders here. They're setting the pace at the peloton right now, and this is Stef Clement, who tried to make a late dash yesterday for glory, the time trial champion of Holland. But he, like a lot of riders, got nobody in that breakaway now. So look at the length of that bunch as they stretch it out. 54 kilometres, Paul. That's around 33 miles to go to the finish. Have you seen the length of the line of this peloton? They're hardly hanging back. So those 4 riders up front are riding very quickly.
They certainly are, but they're locked in now, Phil, at 2.5 minutes, and it's been locked in probably for the last 15 kilometres or so. And I think with the addition now of Boyd Teller coming to the front end of the main field, they can pull those 4 riders in pretty much whenever they wanted to. But when you look at the length of the main field that you were just commenting on, that's an indication that it really is a pretty nasty tempo in there.
Well, you can hear those tyres swishing on the road. Those tyres are bullied hard, pumped up to more than 4 times the pressure of a normal car tyre, and they are just streaking along now. And it's all Liquigas here, indicating either Filippo Pozzato or Francisco Kiki are looking for the win today. Not been a great tour for Liquigas at all this year.
Well, it's a good point you raise there. The majority of cars, you pump up the tyre pressure to between 25 and 35 psi, pounds per square inch. These guys are pumping their tyres up to anything from 90 to 120, and especially on a dry day like this, when they know there's no hint of rain in the air, and when they know that the majority of the road surface is going to be good, they'll probably take the risk of pumping up to around about 110 psi.
They have to be careful, especially on days which are topping 32, 33 degrees Celsius, because the tyres expand, and if they do explode, of course, they'll go off with a real bang. But that's a bigger worry, I think, in the mountains, isn't it, Paul, when you're coming down especially?
Yeah, you get the addition there as well in the mountain stages of once you're applying the brakes tend to heat up the rims quite a lot, and that can heat up the tyres, and that does create a problem with tyres exploding. And so on a mountain stage, you probably would run with a slightly lower pressure in the tyres.
Understandable. I mean, you think you're in an ejector seat if those tyres explode at 120 pounds per square inch. These are the 4 leaders still hoping to hang in. Their latest gap is 2 minutes 35 as they continue to rush towards the Haute-Provence of France. There's the peloton chasing them down. We'll see you in just a moment. That was a flag of Poland, by the way. Welcome back, a Trek aerial view of the beautiful area here around Digne-les-Bains as we go into Haute-Provence today, the High Alps tomorrow. And all of these Romanesque towns are bound in them their hills. The hills the riders will just about tickle today and see for real tomorrow. Tour de France today under the pressure of 4 escaping riders. There they are. 2:34 is still the current gap. 2:35 as I speak, and 31.1 miles to go to the finish. The names are Gutierrez of Caisse d'Epargne, William Bonnet, Crédit Agricole, Bram Tankink, Rabobank, and Sandy Cassar of Française des Jeux. 4 opportunists who got themselves out of a group of 21 just before the peloton snapped up that big group and put them all back in their place. No change of course in the overall. There hasn't been for a few days now. Christian van der Velde will put himself under pressure tomorrow. He's got to keep his eye on everybody. There's still seconds covering the top 5 riders in this race. We're just entering the first sprint here, or the second sprint rather, at Brosson. Huge crowd cheering them through. This race is getting more popular, I think, despite everything that gets thrown at it and the riders who attempt to bring it into disrepute. But these are the riders going through the sprint. And just as they come up here, I don't think they're going to sprint too much here as they start to go. As the riders continue on their way. Well, back at the peloton, there won't be much of a situation back there. They're still going to go through around 3.5 minutes. Gives us a chance to check in with Frankie Andreu, who is our technophile, understands all the bits and bobs of racing bikes. Here he is now looking at the bikes of the Saxo Bank CSC boys.
From first place at Milan-San Remo to winning stages of the Tour de France, like in 2006 with Frank Schleck won in Alpe d'Huez, and in Stage 3 last year when Fabian Cancellara beat out all the sprinters, Cervelo bikes have been making riders into champions. I'm here with Gerard Vroomen from Cervelo, and this is the Cervelo SLC SL. And what goes into not only making a bike lightweight, but also aerodynamic?
Well, at Cervelo we have more experience than any other company in making bikes aerodynamic. We spend about 4 weeks a year in the wind tunnel. So you have these aerodynamic profiles that don't only look aero, they actually are aero. And just all the details on this bike have been optimized for that effect. So the head tube and the chain stays and the seat stays, everything is aerodynamic. Of course, that's only part of the equation if you have a very aerodynamic bike. But it's not very stiff and you can't get your power onto the road. It doesn't do you any good. So we have to optimize the way the carbon fiber goes into the frame. There's about 300 pieces of carbon fiber in a frame, and every piece has to be in the right direction, in the right angle, the right shapes. And that's one of the reasons why we have 14 engineers working for us, because even though we have only 8 real bike models, it takes a lot of people to make those bike models the best in the world.
Definitely a lot of people involved in making the Cervelo bikes, and of course you're going to have your own cheering section on Alpe d'Huez.
Yeah, actually we're shutting down the company the 3rd week of the tour, and everybody's coming over to Alpe d'Huez, and we own the bridge over the road 500 meters from the finish. So there'll be 65 Cervelo employees standing there cheering the team on.
So for Team CSC, they get the benefit of being able to choose the different models that Cervelo offers, from the P3 time trial bike to the R3 SL or even the Cervelo SLC SL. And perhaps this is why Cervelo has helped CSC become the #1 team in the world.
Absolutely, Frankie. Don't forget you can win an SLC SL bicycle on our Saab Watch and Win sweepstakes, so do play that game. Go to versus.com. There's the peloton continuing through at about 2:23 the gap at the moment as they go through the town of Boson. Looking at the peloton here, massive crowd as they're enjoying life here. And the riders here have gone through the crowd. And it is a big crowd, isn't it, as they check out the town here, but the pace is definitely on. Well, the pace is on now, Paul. That 2:21.2 has come down just as they pass through the town here by 3 seconds. But these riders must know they've got a real chase on their hands here. They're not making great inroads.
Well, it's been locked in. They brought it down very dramatically to begin with, but the fact is, Phil, I'm looking to see that there are 3 teams working pretty hard at the front end of the main field, and I reckon they're just controlling the situation. They know it's a hard run into the finish. They've just gone through the sprint point, which is now where the race will start to climb up once again. We're going through here around about 370 meters in altitude, and it's a long drag up the valley floor here to the climb, the 4th category climb at 9 kilometers to go. It'll start to get very lumpy and very difficult for these 4 leaders.
Well, we're getting closer to the col of the day, which is the Col de l'Orme. It's only a couple of kilometers long, but it must be reasonably steep. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called a col. We'll find out. These are the leaders looking low angle there, straight at a pure blue sky and a temperature now of 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Actually, there's hardly any humidity. It's the most pleasant heat, I have to say, today, and the riders will be receiving the benefit of the wind, which is slightly faced to cross and is around 12 miles an hour at the moment. This is the face of Jose Ivan Gutierrez, 5 Tours de France. But whether he's thinking they won't make it, I'm pretty sure of that. That's probably why he shook his head there. William Bonnet in the break, he's had 2 tours under his belt, Bram Tankink 3 and Sandy Cassar 7. So there's no strangers to the Tour de France, these boys. There's Sandy Cassar also forcing a wry smile. I think it's a smile, I'm not too sure actually. It might be a bit of a grimace there. Okay, well, as they continue, we'll take another break. We're going to give you a lot of commercial free towards the end. See you in a moment. Welcome back. Oscar Freire leads in the green jersey competition. As we look at the back of the race here, there's the situation. Hushoft, I don't think he's in 2nd place now. Cavendish is given it on the virtue of his wins, but he is the same points as Hushoft. Zabel is 4th and Kirken is 5. But I have to say that people are saying that Cavendish is not going to finish the Tour de France because of the Olympics. But I wonder if he'll change his mind now that he has got himself up into those top 3 positions in the green jersey. I think we can actually go to the start now and see what he's got to say to Frankie Andreu.
Mark, you have 4 stage wins right now. You just had your morning meeting. You're tied for second place for the green jersey. You are the favorite. Will your team ride aggressively to be able to keep it for a field sprint, or is it the feeling that other teams need to win and you might leave it up to them?
I think, you know, the latter is you know, it's more likely to happen now. You know, we've showed how, you know, we've rode all week, and everyone's looked at us to ride. We've got 4 stage wins now, you know, and I don't think we actually need to do any more, so we'll leave it to the other teams, I think, and let them try and get.
If it comes down to the sprint today, obviously you have a great chance of getting the green jersey. What are your plans going into the Alps? We've heard that you've talked about possibly trying to stop.
You know, I'll take every day as it comes, still take every day as it comes, and I'll always carry on to take every day as it comes. So.
All right, good luck.
Thanks very much.
Well, he's won stages 5, 8, 12 and 13. He tells everybody every day as it comes. His management says he won't go into the Alps, so we'll just have to wait and find out, won't we? Mark Cavendish still always affording us a smile. Just looking at these 4 riders and thinking of Mark Cavendish, Paul. He won stages 5, 8, 12 and 13. Every time you speak to him, he always says, I'm going to take every day as it comes. And he has a wry smile on his face. And yet you talk to the management, no, he's going to go before they'll never see Paris. We don't really know.
Well, I have a feeling, Phil, with the form that he's got, he doesn't want to go away from this race. So logically, he's saying to himself, I need to leave the Tour de France now because I want to try and get a gold medal at the Olympic Games. I want to ride the Madison. It's something that he really has been dreaming about since he won the world title in that event in the early part of this year. But when you're winning stages like this, when you're writing the history books and you've got that form and that sprint, it's difficult to turn your back on this event. After all, for the professional bike rider, this is the biggest event in the world. It is the biggest event of the calendar, and for many of them it's even more important than the Olympic Games.
It is indeed for the bike rider, but for the British public, of course, and for all of the peers there, they'll remember Mark Cavendish forever when he wins a gold medal, because British newspapers will have him all over the newspapers, as indeed they did with Chris Boreman when he was the first gold medalist in cycling for 75 years. But you're right, I mean, when you're lying second in the green jersey competition, very difficult to walk away.
Well, the competition we're talking about is the competition that Stuart O'Grady won in the 2004 Olympic Games, and that's the Madison discipline, which he won there after riding the road race first. And at the time, O'Grady, who'd had the yellow jersey in the Tour, he'd worn the green jersey, he'd won stages in the Tour de France. He said his Olympic gold medal was the greatest moment of his career. But I wonder if he had to choose between the Olympic gold medal and Paris-Roubaix, which he would choose.
Ça c'est la question. Okay, 1:26. The gap is at last beginning to tumble quite quickly now. 42 kilometers to go. What's that, about 26 miles, I guess, as these boys are getting on ripples. It don't look very hilly around here, but in fact it is quite hard going. They're in very exposed countryside. The wind is not entirely favourable today. It is extremely hot as well, but the road surface, the sort that doesn't melt under the wheels like some road surfaces, so it shouldn't be feeling too hard. But there's the drive coming from Bouygues Telecom right now, and Liquigas and Team Milram. We'll take another break, and when we do come back, we'll talk a little bit more about Garmin-Chipotle's David Miller, who might even be jumping away for gold on the last climb of the day today.
Everybody wondered, is he really as passionate about these causes as he shows to the press?
Yes, David Miller there. These are the standings at the moment of the Garmin-Chipotle team. Only Magnus Bagstedt sadly eliminated into Aurillac. The rest of the riders still riding extremely well, and all in defence of Christian van der Velde, who goes into the mountains tomorrow, 38 seconds off that yellow jersey. David Miller there at 35 minutes, but he is the strong man when it comes to guiding these boys around the roads, and he also rode high once. So let's tell you a little bit more about the British former champion.
I grew up in a lot of countries, but the one thing that kind of took me between all the countries I used to always do was cycling. And I kind of fell in love with the sport, and I fell in love with the dream of doing a Tour de France. I managed to get a professional contract by the time I was 19, and by the time I was 27, I'd been arrested for doping. I then got banned for 2 years.
He's seen
what drugs in cycling can do, and he's taken 2 years out of the sport, and he paid a very, very hefty price for the mistake he made.
Everybody wondered, is he really as passionate about these causes as he shows to the press? And within 5 minutes, it's just like, wow, he's an amazing guy. The energy he brings, the focus, and also the experience. And all three are huge assets to this program.
David Miller brings, obviously, a wealth of experience, both on and off the bike. He's a fantastic rider. It's no secret he's made some mistakes, and instead of just kind of disappearing into the shadows or denying it, he said, yeah, I made a mistake, but I want to make it right, and I want to help the next generation not have to deal with this. It's great having a leader like that on the team.
As far as an athlete, he's an enormous motor. His talent is great. He's a natural leader. He's a very intelligent person, and he's a very talented bike rider. He's a guy who, won the prologue of Paris-Nice last year, and he was also named to the WADA Athletes Board.
He's been around the sport. He's done everything. He's done all the Grand Tours. He knows a lot about cycling. His leadership values are very, very high. When he says something, we all will listen. We've seen him achieve great things, and we all have a lot of faith in his decisions.
Obviously, he's one of the most gifted athletes out there, and that's just another fantastic thing that this team now has going. We've got a lot of guys with incredible talent, and hopefully we can pull that all together and really turn it into some concrete results.
Yes, and David Miller's never been happier than with this new American team, Gorman Chipotle either. He now is, of course, a great campaigner against drugs in sport. A little bit of information for you. He's born in Malta, actually, although, as his mum will tell you, she calls him a Scot because she's Glaswegian. 3 career Tour de France stage wins. He's held the yellow jersey in the Tour de France and second overall in this year's Tour of California, sponsored there by Amgen. Looking out across the field, and they are closing in. It's 1 minute 10 seconds now at 23 miles to go. Average speed today 28.2 miles an hour, or 45.4 kilometers an hour, so it's a very quick Tour de France stage today, despite the fact they've got the mountains tomorrow. They still need to lift it just a bit, otherwise they're going to get themselves all wrapped up with the Col de l'Orme, which only comes 9.5 kilometers from the finish. If our computer is to have any credence at all, Paul, they've got to catch him in 4 kilometers.
Well, do you believe the computer? You haven't actually believed it since the start of the tour.
Have I? Yeah.
I like to use it as a guessometer rather than an actual finite maneuver. It's something that we can use as a guideline, but it doesn't factor out the strength of character of some of these bike riders, and it doesn't either factor out the fact that they can lift their speed. It was working out on the average speed, but we do know that the leading group of 4 riders, I think, are judging their average speed on the return of the main field. And for a lot of occasions, they're actually prolonging the agony of the chase for the men in the pack.
Well, other than the fact that we've had one retirement today of Nicolas Jalabert, it's been a pretty routine stage. We always have somebody fall off. Today it was Fabien Weckman, but he stood straight up, grabbed his bike and got back in. Other than that, it's just been the break and the bunch. And the bunch is now getting around that corner. They might start to see this rider as the helicopters flying over the race start to reveal the position of that breakaway. So the gap is 1:17. It's gone out very slightly, but the bunch are still chasing. For the break, come back and join us as we get towards that climb before the finish.